Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Croner webinar in association with Sport and Activity Professionals, Kickstarters and how to manage them. My name's Christian Squires. I'm one of Croner's business advisors, and I'm going to be introducing Mark Rasher, who I think a lot of you know from Sports and Activity Professionals, who's going to give you an insight into how the Kickstart scheme works. And also his role as a gateway. And I'd also like to warmly introduce Amanda Chadwick, who's one of our expert speakers, who will be going through sort of all the considerations that you need to make around the Kickstart scheme from an employment law and health and safety perspective. So for any of you who don't know much about Croner, we as a business have been around since the 1940s. We support more than 12,000 clients throughout the UK, and also more than 130 member associations. So essentially we provide an outsourced HR, employment law and health and safety support service. If you've got any questions following on from the webinar today, anything that we've not covered off, or anything specific that you'd like to run through with me, or if you'd like to know a bit more about what we do and how we can potentially support you as a business, I can gladly arrange a complimentary video meeting after the session. The service we provide, so consultancy, software, advice and insurance. So from an employment law perspective, we help our clients with every type of contract, be it a specific contract for the Kickstart scheme, apprentice agreements, volunteer agreements, 0 hours, full-time, part-time, whatever you need, or even contract for services for your self-employed people who've got on that arrangement. For health and safety, very prominent at the moment, you'll have seen on the news, being COVID secure, more important than ever. We help to keep all your documentation up to date, so your policy, safety handbooks, etc. And you have an annual visit from a consultant. The advice teams that we provide through Croner for HR, employment law and health and safety, our advisors are available 24/7, 365 days a year. You can even ring through our app now that you have on your phone to get support from that side of things. And finally, the insurance. With our optional insurance, that provides you with protection against tribunals and also legal support if you have a crisis from a health and safety perspective where you might need to speak to the HSE or whichever authority and do witness statements. So thank you for listening so far. I'll pass you over to Mark now, who can give you a bit of an overview about the Kickstart scheme.
Thanks, Christian. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good stuff. So yeah, for those that don't know Croner, they've been really good to my clients over the years. Quite a few use them. Christian's always a really good source of information and a good first chat. If anyone's got a query or something, he's always been really good to people for me. So if you do have any questions on that area, get in touch with Christian and he'll happily help you out, point you in the right direction. So for those that don't know me, as Christian said, my name is Mark Rasher. I own a business called Sport and Activity Professionals. I've been in the sector for 26 years. I used to run a business that we franchised across the world, and we had it in 61 countries, worked with 100,000 customers a week in the UK and 1.1 million worldwide. And that was a franchise business that we built over a number of years. And I was a partner in that and helped grow it. About 10 years ago, I started my own consultancy, training, education business, working with people in that sector and beyond, kind of helping them to grow and develop and improve their businesses and their staff. And recently, I was asked to be a gateway for the Kickstart scheme, because somebody that knows me was involved with a previous guys of that called the Future Jobs Fund. They knew that we were involved in that Future Jobs Fund previously. We had 400 employees through that, and 200 of those were kept on permanently. So it was a very successful scheme from our perspective. It was very successful from the Department of Work and Pensions perspective. They know that I'm fairly well connected in this sector and asked me if I would be a gateway, because I understand the employers and obviously understand how to work with the employees, because part of the business we ran was a foundation that worked with kind of 14 to 24-year-olds to develop these similar sorts of things. So for those that don't know the Kickstart scheme, I'll give you a brief overview. There's lots of information online to follow up, and I can happily support people. But it's basically a really, really good scheme the government put in place, which tends to happen in major recessions. You know, they have the previous guys of this that I was involved with was called the Future Jobs Fund, and there's been previous guys before that I'm sure Amanda will tell you about. And basically, it covers 18 to 25-year-olds. They allow, or they'll fully fund 25 hours per week at minimum wage for up to 6 months. You can take employees on for more than 25 hours, and you can pay them more. And Amanda will probably cover what's the best practice in terms of that, whether you do that to start with or whether you do it further down the line, contracts and all those sorts of things. But that's the minimum that's expected. They'll cover contributions towards national insurance and any automatic enrolment things. So basically, it doesn't cost the employer anything. The government's baseline is that these employees are currently on universal credit and have been for 3 months or more, so they class as long-term unemployed, which sounds, you know, connotations of long-term unemployed sound terrible when someone describes themselves as that, but actually, as I said, might have only been on universal credit for 3 months or more. It's someone leaving school or university last June. It's someone being made redundant from a sector that struggled, or a business that struggled through no fault of their own, and just because of the jobs market just isn't able to get back into a role despite, you know, their obvious skills and character traits, just because it's so difficult. So the government's baseline is that they'll have 6 months of fantastic experience in a sector. They'll improve their skills, their CV, their experience, and primarily their confidence will be improved. That's a big thing that gets hit during times like this. A lot of people's psyche is based around work and being useful and all those sort of things. And you think it'd be nice to sit at home for 6 months or more doing nothing, but actually, when you're twiddling your thumbs, you find it very psychologically damaging. So they want to make sure that there's not permanent damage caused by these. And you know, the unemployment rate at the moment is about 4.8% across the board, with 18 to 25-year-olds, it's 15% and growing, because they're the age range that gets hit the most for various different reasons. So if you want to take someone on through this, which, you know, obviously I'm biased, but I'd advise you to look at this. And if you're on the webinar, probably there's at least a little bit of interest if you're not already involved in it. I'd say it's a fantastic benefit. Most SMEs have to go through a gateway, because otherwise you've got to take on more than 30 members of staff. What a gateway does, someone like me, they have to be approved by the government, go through a load of checks and balances and prove that they're able to deliver the stuff that a gateway should. Is a gateway will, you know, provide training and support to the employers, provide training and support to the employees, both during their work experience and afterwards, because there's a lot of employability stuff to do afterwards if they're not taken on. It might provide qualifications, it provides compliance with the program for the employer. It helps with the government checks going through the process, with back office admin, with a bit of financial management, passing on the monies and so on and so forth, and guidance on recruitment. So there's a number of different areas that a gateway provides. And if you're looking at a gateway, the things I'd say to look at are, you know, have they got experience of dealing with employers? Do they understand the needs of the employer? And do they understand the needs of the employee? Have they worked with similar sorts of age groups, similar sorts of demographics, and similar sorts of employability, training, development sorts of programs? Because those are the key things. Lots of gateways out there, but the government hasn't done a huge amount of checks and balances on some of those. And some of the things I've seen advertised, I think personally are morally and ethically wrong in terms of the employees. I mean, to do a lot when you're finding a gateway. And obviously, I'm biased, but I'd suggest coming to me. My details will be put up at the end. So the key things you need to think of, and the benefits of this, is that if you think of it from an employer's perspective, it's a great opportunity for the employer to use it to develop the next generation of staff to use it as almost a bounce back benefit, because it's been really hard for businesses this year. The challenge with employing people is that, you know, you've got that initial risk of, are they the right person, and I've got to pay them for 3 to 6 months till I find out what they're really like. This takes away a huge amount of the risk there, and assuming you get the recruitment processes right and so on and so forth, which we'll discuss a little bit, then you get the right sort of person with the right sort of character traits, and they can be a real benefit to your business going forward. You can use it to grow, to delegate tasks, to allow you to grow. So maybe it's new projects. It's huge. There's a whole range of roles you can put these people on, and they vary from, I said, 18-year-olds just leaving school to people who've got a 2 or 3 years work experience post university. So there's a huge range of people on there. From the employee's perspective, it's a great chance for them to prove themselves, to enhance their CV, skills, experience, and ultimately it's almost a 6-month job interview for them to prove themselves indispensable. And that's why we took on half of those people, because we looked at them and thought, you're talented, you're hardworking, you're bright, you're willing to learn. We'd be daft to let you go. And we built, a lot of the franchisees grew their businesses through those people. So it's a fantastic scheme for both employees and employers if it's done right, and you get a rough diamond and you polish them and turn them into someone that's going on to have a fantastic career in this sector or another. I'll pass you over to Amanda now. I'll go into more details about the HR and health and safety aspects of it and answer any questions.
Mark,
Amanda.
Okay, Mark, I was going to say, if you want to interject at any point either, you're quite welcome to. And does anybody mind if I just take my jumper off? I'm sweating cold. I've sat here and I'm actually sweltering, so because the temperature's gone a bit up in Wales. So I'm just gonna, if you're okay, just for a second, I'm gonna take my jumper off, if that's all right. Sorry about that. Absolutely roasting here. I'm nearly fainting. So, and I don't have any water. So hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar on the Kickstart scheme. My name is Amanda Chunk, and I'm a speaker, a writer. I used to represent a tribunal. I don't anymore. And I've been doing this job for over 30 years, and this is really special to me. The Kickstart scheme is really special. It's really positive. We can really work with people, young people, to get them out of this hole that we might see a lot of people going into at the moment because of this huge pandemic we've been going through, and it's really close to my heart, so that's why I'm overjoyed really to be speaking with Mark and Christian today about the Kickstart scheme and the fact that it will be helping so many people. So what I'm going to do now is go to the slides. We do actually have a question which says, I didn't actually, Mark, I think you can see the question because the question's to you. So I don't know if you want to read that for a second and have a look at it. But there's a question, so sorry about this. Yeah, so if you have a look at that question, sorry, I'm about to send you an email. So if you have a look at that question there and have a look on this, and I'll read it again in a moment. So what we're going to cover today, guidance on the new Kickstart scheme, how best to recruit Kickstarters and what to look for here, filling out a good job description, legal requirements, so HR, very important. And by the way, before the webinar today, we had a lot of questions about, I've got somebody who's contracted or self-employed. I really want to cover that because I want you to know that there's huge law at the moment on what is self-employed and what isn't. You may have heard of the Uber case. And so I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about that actually right at the very beginning, because I want to clear up what is self-employed and what isn't. So we're also going to talk about health and safety concerns, which really we do have to cover, because we're taking on, in some circumstances, a young person who's untrained in a job. We need to put things in place to protect them, okay? And I can help you do that. So typical issues with younger members of staff and how to deal with them. We know what that is, don't we? Texting on the phone, and that's certain things, but we're seeing that with older employees now as well. How to mentor, coach and train them in the business, and managing Kickstarters to get the best outcomes from the funded employee. So that's what we're going to cover today. And it's a lot to go through, but I'm so enthusiastic about this. So this Kickstart scheme is aimed at creating new high quality jobs to help the 16 to 24-year-olds that are unemployed on universal credit. We've seen a lot of people in the industries that are, have been furloughed, have been laid off on the back of this pandemic that's been going on now for a year. And we know that we learned from the early 80s, there was mass unemployment, people get disheartened, it affects mental health. So what the government have said, we're going to give 2 billion as an investment, and they might well, you never know, top that up if it's successful. And that's the point here. We've got to make it successful. We've got to use it in the right way. And in the 1980s, the very beginning of the 1980s, if you were starting work at that point, which I was, I personally was at college, and I was set out doing this college course, and I phoned my mum to say I was getting the 4:30 bus. My mum said, I'm really, really sorry, we've had a letter from the government, and because me and your dad work, and they didn't earn loads of money, but we're not going to get a grant to send you to college or university, so you're going to have to get a job, really. So I just thought, right, okay. My friend was on a YTS, if you remember, a youth training scheme, and I let the college know that day, went to my tutors. I was absolutely devastated. I thought, this happens. I walked down the road, knocked on the door of a YTS company, very much like what Mark does and his gateway, and said, look, I'd like a job, really, a YTS training scheme. And they literally trained me within 6 weeks, and then they put me out into a company on a youth training scheme. I got £25 a week, and it was the best thing I've ever done in my life, because it gave me a foot in the door, surrounded by people that were mentoring me, that I still keep in contact with these women today. And after 6 weeks of working there, they gave me a full-time job. And it was the most amazing experience that I've had, so this is what you can do. Look where I am now. I speak for nearly every association and federation in the UK. I write, I'm law trained, health, and this was all on the back of a YTS back in 1984. And this is what you can do for your staff. I will warn you though, we need to put things in place to protect us as a company, because there will be the odd one that we might want to have, a conversation with, but we are there to mentor, we're there to support. What the government say is that they will cover participants' expenses for 6 months. What that means is they will cover, the cost of that, but also what they will do is they will help you with any ongoing training, because what you are, and I want to point this out, is you are a mentor, so you want to get the best out of this person, and the ultimate goal is that you're actually going to take them on at the end of it. But it should consist, this contract, of a minimum of 25 hours per week. It's paid at the national minimum wage. Just a little bit of information on the back of that. The national minimum wage in April was, for the higher end, 25. And that's been lowered to 23. So I want to point that out, because a lot of you have got other employees, and you need to know that that's a law change that's coming in April. The scheme will cover 100% of relevant national minimum wage for 24 hours a week, and employer national insurance contributions and employer minimum automatic enrolment. This is what it covers, okay? So they're saying, please, support these people. Let's take them on. Let's train them. Let's mentor them. And this is what the Kickstart, I'm saying it back to front, the start kick. The Kickstart scheme is. So the scheme is being run across several industries in England, Scotland and Wales. It's open to all employers who meet the minimum requirements for offering the scheme. And I know Mark has so much information about that. So if you do mind, I would like to do it. I'd like to support those people, and I'd like to bring people in and mentor them. And by the way, for you might have people that have been there for years within your company that have lost their drive and enthusiasm. And what we suggest, especially in apprenticeship schemes and the Kickstart scheme, is maybe buddying people up, because there's a lot of trades that can't be, and habits that can't be learned in a classroom environment. So this gives people the opportunity to learn them within the workplace. This will be open until December 2021, so that's when you have the opportunity to take these people on, with the option of it being extended. So I think if this is very successful, which I hope it will be, and I'm sure everybody sat there now, I know as a mother, I've got 4 children, my 2 youngest are 19 and 16, and I know how disheartening this pandemic's been. the fact that, you know, it is harder to get a job. There aren't jobs out there. People are being made redundant. And so this is a real foot in the door for those people to learn something, to get some work experience, and to come out of this as better people with more qualifications and training, rather than maybe being at home on universal credit, which will be affecting people's mental health. So the Kickstart scheme, when and how. Okay, so I'm just going to just to remind everybody, the scheme, as I said, is being run across England, Scotland and Wales. Remembering Isle of Man, Jersey and Guernsey all fall within the UK. But the scheme, and if you are outside of those jurisdictions, if you are, you know, for example, in the Isle of Man, Jersey and Guernsey, give us a call, we'll give you more information about that. The scheme is being run across several industries. It's open to all employers. The minimum requirements must be an existing business with a track record of fiscal competence, okay? Applications from employers should be for at least 30 vacancies. Now, Mark can help you a little bit with this, because when we've got a gateway like Mark's got, with the experience that he's got of working successfully, because there's, you know, there will be companies out there that spring up and say, we can do this, but they won't have the background that Mark's got with the success of working with people to get the ultimate goal of actually, if you don't take them on, finding them a job in another field, that you can be part of that success. If you're not applying through the gateway, so applications from employers should be for at least 30 vacancies if you're not applying through the gateway. Mark can help you through the gateway for less than that. Vacancies should be new and not a replacement of an existing job. Now, one of the questions I had was, I've got a member of staff who I had on a, you know, an intermittent contract last year. And then I brought them into work, and then I furloughed them, but now they don't work for me anymore, and the contract ended, and they're actually now on a credit, universal credit. This is what we're looking for, you know, somebody who's not working for you. So we've got, it's not replacing an existing job. So you can't say, for example, have me working there and then think, well, I'll put Amanda on the Kickstart scheme. That's not what it's for, okay? It's for a new job, a new vacancy. You can advertise it, by the way, as a Kickstart vacancy. Employers must be prepared for that 25 hours a week for participants for at least 6 months. They're paid at the appropriate national minimum wage for their age group. As I said, national minimum wage in April is brought down to 23. Employers must demonstrate the employability support they will provide to support to participants to support their future careers. So, you know, helping them with the skills they need. And it's amazing what skills you have within the workplace that you can support people with. And this can be things like writing their CV. You know, I know when my, all of my children, when they've applied for jobs and they've gone, oh, writing a CV. Even my sister-in-laws, my family members, they go, oh, you give us a handwriting CV. Everybody goes, oh, no. It's like a dreaded moment. You can help them do that because you have people applying for jobs anyway. So you can support them writing CVs, even helping them in an interview, you know, setting them up for their future careers. So what are new job placements? So in order to prove that placements are new, employers can provide the following supporting information during their application to join the scheme. Information should be provided on changes made to the workforce in the last 6 months, including redundancies or change in working hours of existing staff. The number of people such changes have affected, and the size of the workforce as a whole, the type of roles, its function, and the salary on average of the roles that such changes affect. If Kickstart job replacements will be similar to jobs where changes have been made due to things such as redundancies or change of working hours, if these new jobs would have been created without the Kickstart scheme funding, and recruitment either started, completed or paused in the last 6 months, or how similar these are to the roles proposed under the scheme. If the employer sought advice from trade unions and details of advice received. So this is what you have to do in order to prove that job placements are new. And it's very simple because Mark can help you with that. And also Christian can give you some advice on that as well. And while we're on this slide, actually talking about, you know, we have had this pandemic for a year. We have had massive changes in employment, and we've had, you know, people changing terms and conditions, laying people off, shortening hours, redundancies. I would like to say at this moment in time, as employers, because I know I'm speaking to employers out there, that you need to make sure you get it right, okay? And that's because we are taking on new clients at the moment. There's two hot topics that we've found. The first one is, and Christine will back me up on this, the first one, that wasn't a threat, that was, Christine will back me up on this, is are there employers out there that have got redundancy wrong? Okay, we've got people that have got, that they haven't done it, people are saying they're unfair selected, and also the other one is people saying that they're not working in a COVID safe environment. You need to make sure that you make sure the environment is COVID safe. People are videoing and then using that as evidence. So we need to be spot on at the minute. So when I say, in order to prove that job replacements are new, employers can provide the following supporting information during their application to join the scheme. And it's just saying, look, changes to our workforce have been made in the last 6 months. This is what we've had to do, or we've had to change terms and conditions, or we furloughed some people. And it really is step by step. It's really self-explanatory what you have to do. It's very simple to apply, and when you've got somebody helping you apply anyway, Mark makes the process so much easier. So making Kickstarters employable. Okay, so employers will need to show how they will improve the skills and experience of their Kickstarters. So they can do this by adding the following to their application form. Okay, now application forms are really important. CVs aren't a legal document, but application forms are if they say it. So in what you would say is details of the support that will be offered. So for example, you would say mentoring, CV writing, interview preparation, helping people through an interview, training in the industries that you are picking, and you're talking about the details of the support that you'll be offered, how to act at an interview, how to dress at work, common problems in work, at what stage the support will be offered. So I would say right from the minute we take somebody on, we train them in health and safety through the induction, we help them, we go through their existing CV that they've got, we will talk them through it. So at what stage the support will be offered, and this can be at the start of the scheme, midway, or through the end. So, and it's sitting down and thinking, how can I help this individual? So, and there's lots of ways you can help people. So how many hours it will take to offer the support, and who by, and how support will be monitored to ensure that it's effective. And that's something, again, that both Christine and Mark can help step by step and say, this is what you should be doing, and the documents you should be using at each stage, and how feedback can be provided to employers by participants during and after the process, and how it will be taken on board to improve the service if necessary. So what we've got with making people employable, you are taking people that might have been unemployed for a long time. Now, I was talking to Mark and Christine yesterday. My sister Lulu, she's one of the general managers at Manchester Airport. She's worked there for decades since leaving school, and she's very well liked. And we've got a huge background in our family. We come from a huge family. My mum fostered lots of children, specialising in teenagers. So for me, as I keep saying to you, this is really close at heart. If any of you listen and you really want to take Kickstarters on, I'm so passionate about it. I joined Mark and Christian with this. We want to make it successful. We don't want to have hiccups. We want you to go, yeah, we help that person. And my sister said that people turn, she works with a local job centre. She said people turn up, and they turn up in what they think is their smartest clothes, which might be a new pair of trainers or a tracksuit, and it might not be what you want for an interview. So what you have to do again is you have to train people that the jobs in the future that they go for, maybe this isn't what you wear. You wouldn't sit with your phone in the waiting room, and training those people, so from the minute that you work with that person from day one, you can document exactly how you've helped that person and mentored them from the minute you've taken them on. And it just, it helps that person feel like you are supporting them, and also including them and making them inclusive. So I know when I was first taken on in my YTS, I was sent a big box. This is before the days of the pandemic, and all these delivery, drivers like Amazon. I had a parcel arrive. No, people didn't have parcels in those days. A parcel arrived addressed to me at the age of 16. A big parcel. When we opened it up, in there was a full uniform. Like, you could do that, like a welcome thing. A full uniform with a coat, with a whole uniform, a jacket, a mug, pens, everything. I never felt so welcome in my life and so excited, even though I was only getting £25 a week to start this job. and and thought I better look after that. And then arriving at work on the first day and being made to feel so welcome. There's so much we could do to set the seed to begin with when we're taking on this Kickstarter anyway, because it's a new venture for you, it's a new venture for them, and to say that this is what we do, and just to say these are the ground rules, having this induction, and making them employable, making them already at the very beginning buy in to working with you to make them great and give them a future. So these are the types of things you can do. Kickstart scheme dues: offer a minimum 25 hours a week of minimum 6 months. You can give more than that, okay? Now, pay at least the minimum wage, national minimum wage. Support participants in their search for long-term employment or training. So, and it is inevitable. Some companies that are listening will only be going for the full, 6 months, and they will think we're just going to help you for 6 months. Some people out there won't, will have the intentions of keeping people on forever, but what happens is at the end of the 6 months, they haven't got the work there. So, what within this contract, what you might have is embedded in there is suitability, but also saying it's a Kickstart fixed term contract, but it's also a great idea to in that contract to say that we will let you know before it ends whether it's going forward after the 6 months or not. Supporting participants in the long-term search for employment, and helping them with their journey outside of the work after those 6 months. Offer support to allow participants to gain relevant transferable skills, so teamwork, organizational communication skills, and CV writing. Now, I'm going to stop on this, okay, because when I was young, when you, some of you out there were younger too, if we had somebody at work that was insular, didn't socially interact, we wouldn't know whether they were on a spectrum or not, okay? We wouldn't know if somebody had mental health issues because it wasn't spoken about. People didn't speak about mental health. They didn't speak about people that might have Asperger's or ADHD. These are like new things we're hearing more and more now, although it's not a new thing, but we didn't speak about them years and years ago. Now, I would like to know if I employ somebody that has a protected characteristic. I would like to know if you're having counselling. I would like to know if you've got a medical condition that I need to be aware of, because I want to support you, okay? And I want to know how I can work with you to get the best out of you. So on your employee handbook, which you will have for these Kickstarters, because they have the same rights as everybody else, is in the employee handbook, you'd have a very simple term and condition, which you should have for all your regular staff anyway. And what it would say is if you have a medical condition, if you have your medical condition changes, you've got a disability, or your disability changes, you have a counselling, you've got, you have to let us know at the early stage written so we can implement our health and safety standards. That's very, very, very important that you have that in both your handbook and also your health and safety handbook too, because it protects you, but also lets you know that if somebody has got some sort of a protected characteristic or has a disability, that you need to know about that. So offer at least 30 placements, prepare job descriptions for each role in your application if your application is successful. So these are the things that you should be doing. Kickstart schemes don't replace existing roles with a Kickstart scheme placements. Ensure that they are new. Reduce existing staff hours to make room for a Kickstart role. Please don't do that. And make participants undergo extensive training before the commencement of their placement. These are the things that you don't do. You're saying, I've got a Kickstart scheme. I'm advertising it as a Kickstart scheme. It's saying this is for 6 months, minimum 6 months. This is a Kickstart scheme. You're advertising it as that. And also as well, what we've got is reminding people when you're advertising, you can discriminate if you can objectively justify it. However, what we don't want, and this sounds, we don't want positive discrimination. Positive discrimination is where you deliberately get somebody for the job because you've got to tick a box, if you like. What we want is positive action, which is where if you know you want to have a Kickstart scheme and there's an underrepresented area, say for example it's a children's nursery and you want more male candidates, then you might advertise that in an area where more men might read it. So we want positive action. So that's just part of the advertising. I wanted to remind you at this stage that the do's and don'ts. So job descriptions, filling out a job description as the forms they ask for essentially a job description that goes to the job centre. So it's saying what you're expecting of somebody. It can also be advertised, so any guidance on putting an advert out on social media can be done on Indeed, on LinkedIn, for example. But I doubt that many people will be on LinkedIn. So your social media sites, people now look for jobs on Facebook and and those types of places. So filling out a job description and then putting on there with the job advert. Job description should clearly outline the needs and requirements for the job as normal. They should also outline usual information that would be found in normal adverts for a fixed term contract. So let me pick you up on this, okay, and talk about contracts for a second. There's lots of different contracts out there. We've got full-time contracts, we've got part-time contracts, we've got casual worker contracts, we've got 0-hour contracts, we've got worker agreements, we've got self-employed, we've got contract for services, we've got volunteer agreements, apprentice agreements. There's lots of different contracts out here. When we issue a temporary contract doesn't have a date on it, and they have different rights on a temporary contract. This isn't a temporary contract. This is a fixed term contract, which has different rights altogether. And I want to make this perfectly clear. A temporary contract doesn't have a date attached. It carries on. A fixed term contract is a contract where you're saying, I'm taking you on, Amanda, from the 1st of January to the 6 months, the 30th of June. I had to work out when my 6 months was, 30th of June, and that's the end date of that contract. And even though it's fixed term, we will let you know. And it's always best, actually, when you're ending a fixed term contract, to write to that person to remind them that it will end. So we've got this fixed term contract. So now we've got a date attached to it. This is the difference between that and a temporary one. Once you put a date on it, they have exactly the same rights as a full-time worker, as an ordinary employee, because it's fixed term. So we need to make sure that we put that end date on it. That I would encourage a suitability clause, and also putting the hours in there and how long the placement is expected to last. And like I said to you, after 6 weeks I was taken on, so I came off my YTS agreement that we had in those days, and they were well ahead of their time actually in 1984, and they gave me a full they made me fill in an application form anyway when I was on the YTS, but also on the when I then was given a full-time job, I got a letter to congratulate me, and then I got a proper contract off them. Although this is a proper contract, but a contract that was, of the proper rate that it should be, the proper hours that it should be. And so just to let you know, this fixed-term contract is different to a temporary contract because it's got a date at the end of it, and that gives people enhanced rights, obviously, because we've got maternity rights, etc. here, and paternity. The description also make it clear that the job is part of the Kickstarter scheme, so you'd say that in there and outline the training and support that will be provided in detail, and how it will be provided and how it will be monitored. Now I want to stop for a second there again. This isn't new, by the way, okay? Last year, at the beginning of April, the Good Work Plan came into place in ordinary law for every single employer in the UK. And even your ordinary employees are there and you've had them for years, their terms and conditions, their contract of employment actually should be enhanced to include, training, any training they get, any paid training, any paid time off. And every single person gets a contract, not 8 weeks later, but from day one now. And this includes your Kickstarters. They get their contract either before you take them on the first day of employment. The law changed last year to say that anybody you take on from now on has a contract from day one. So I don't, if you know that, but I wanted to remind you of that. And if your terms and conditions, your statement main terms actually, you might want to review that to make sure that you are talking about enhanced pay and everything in there, and that it talks about training. So this isn't new. What we're asking you to do in the Kickstarter scheme is job description and their contract. It's new. It's something that should have been started to be done last year for everybody. So talking about training. And in this one, you're talking about support as well, in detail, and how it will be provided and how it will be monitored. Liaison with the job centre to get the jobs advertised on social media and job websites, as these are more likely to be viewed by younger people. Remember that positive action. We're trying to encourage these younger people. So we're not going to advertise it in Saga magazine, for example. We're not going to advertise it on Talk Sport. I'm joking, but we're not advertising it on Radio 4. you know, we're advertising on these things that younger people will use, such, you know, of the social media sites, the radio stations that people would be listening to. So recruiting Kickstarters, first of all, it's important to understand what is required in Kickstarter jobs. The key things to know are as follows. They need to be new and not a replacement of an existing job or cause current staff to have a reduced workload. They must be for at least 25 hours a week for a period of 6 months. That the placements provide the relevant training required, and that all applicants need to be aged between 16 and 24 and on universal credit at risk of long-term unemployment. Make sure that the individuals employed are prepared to work under the Kickstart scheme in order to ensure that taking them on is worth it. In particular, the young person needs to be prepared or take steps to become more employable. So you're working with them. We're looking for long-term work, including career advice and setting goals, supporting with them CVs and interview preparations, developing their skills in the workplace, getting the best out of that person. And companies should liaise with their gateway in order to advertise these roles and seek recommendations on who could be put forward. So legal requirements for Kickstarters. I keep repeating this, and it's very repetitive actually, but I just want to remind you they need to pay at least the national minimum wage for the relevant age group. Reminding yourself, as I said, in April this year, the minimum wage group, it was 25, it's now been brought down to 23, okay? And that's for the highest level. National insurance and pension contributions still need to be made, but will be refunded. Employers must offer at least 25 hours per week. You can offer more if necessary, but this needs to be clearly stated in the contract. It also should be made clear how long the placement is to last. All applicants should be given equal opportunities to develop, progress and succeed, and discrimination laws will still count even in these placements. So let me tell you what the protected characteristics are. So in your handbook that you have for all your staff, it should say we have an equal opportunity bullying harassment policy, and in there we've got race, which isn't just skin colour, it's accent as well. Race, religion, there's 85 recognised religions in the UK. We've got race, religion, religious belief, no belief, environmental belief, political opinion, affiliation, marital status, disability, gender, gender reassignment, age, and sexual orientation. That's in there. So if anybody feels that they've been discriminated against, that you've got that policy in there. So if I work there, for example, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that people just, you know, that I might be picked on for something, and you, the employer, you have vicarious liability. You don't know what's going on, but somebody might be bullying me or picking on me. Then you've got this policy in place that you show people to say, if you have, if you feel that somebody's saying something you're not comfortable with it, come to us and we can sort it out. And it's showing, you know, your due diligence, your caring, and that you're listening to your staff. And you can nip things in the bud if people know the route to go through. So all applicants should be given equal opportunities to develop, progress, and succeed. And those discrimination laws will still count even in these placements. As I've said, it doesn't matter who you take on, everybody's protected. And quite rightly so. Employees should still receive a statement of main terms from day one of their employment, setting out the conditions of the placement, if it is the intention of the employer to keep them on permanently following the end of this period, and a separate contract should be produced, as I said earlier. They should be subject to the same disciplinary and grievance procedures as other members of staff. So if an employee is dismissed during this time, HMRC will stop providing the funding to employers, and this is to be paid monthly in arrears. However, employers will need to inform the DWP or HMRC of this and be prepared to clearly outline why this decision has been taken. Now, let's just stop on that note for a second. You know, a suitability clause I like to have in a handbook, which says, you know, if it's not working out, you know, you're not suitable for the job, we can end this at any point. And there should be embedded into this fixed term contract a get out of jail clause if it's not working out. That said, you know, you're talking about young people here. You're talking about, I remember that, you know, I fell asleep at work a couple of times, you know, when I was younger. And that wasn't because it was boring. It's because they put me on a late shift, which finished at 6 o'clock, so it's not that late, left me alone in the office, and I was bored, if I'm honest with you, and I'd been out the night before. I sat, and it was so relaxing. There was no telephone calls, and I just sat there and nodded off. you know, and the cleaner woke me up at 9 o'clock at night and said that phone keeps ringing. It was my mum wondering where I was, but I was left on my own. Actually, now you wouldn't leave a young worker on their own in the office, would you, because of health and safety, and also, you know, and unattended, for example. So, you know, and things like, you know, you just go, oh, I've got a bit of a headache, you know, I'm bringing in, and it's training that person. But what we need to do is evidence if things are happening and people aren't listening to you, is evidence what's going on, and you know, putting that down. And so when the HMRC say, why did you end this fixed term contract? First of all, you would say, we've got embedded in there terms and conditions that allow us to do that. We can help you with that. But also, we end this contract because we spoke to Amanda Chadwick on several occasions. We've documented it, we've evidenced it. We gave her lots and lots of chances, which you should be expected to do with young people, but actually it just wasn't working out. You know, what we do see is, you know, we see new things we've never seen before in the workplace, you know, and so people gaming all night, maybe, you know, different things that we might not have seen in the past. And to really to be able to spot those signs and work with that individual to say it's really important. And that is why I talk about employee engagement from day one. Okay, if you're not engaging with that person, they're not committed to you. So likely, you know, and I'm not saying everybody does this, but game all night and then try and rush to work in the morning, but then be late. So you need to engage with them, because how I felt in my YTS was that I was engaged straight away with the company and the people that work there, and I felt if I let them down, I was letting myself down. I was letting them down, and I didn't want to feel that disappointment. So for me, they bought me straight away and I bought them, and that worked with us all the way through. And that's what you want to try and achieve with these members of staff. You know, you will get teething problems, but I think that you can iron those out, you can work with them. So how to mentor, coach and train them in business. The work placements provided need to fundamentally achieve the following: employability support, to give employees the transferable skills needed to continue into gainful employment, training or education, such as teamwork, organisation or communication skills. That is key, because, you know, I take, my eldest daughter is 29. And mobile phones first came out years ago, and she got one, and then it was the worst thing I ever did, because she never got off it. Okay, and that we've seen that with our other children, and they're brilliant for communication. But you've seen a child or a young adult in work, you know it with your own children or nieces and nephews, and what happens is they'll be laughing. You see it with adults, they're laughing like that and talking to you, and then suddenly a text will come through. They'll read it and their mood will change, and suddenly they're bratty, you know, slamming about. And because, you know, these are young adults, they maybe haven't been trained how to work, in how to act in work. They need your encouragement to show them, you know, mobile phone rules, you know. And what I say in any business, because it isn't just young people nowadays, it's older people. But for me, I don't like mobile phones in work. I think they're intrusive. I think it affects people's mental health, especially in the younger people, because if somebody doesn't like something or there's a comment about them, it affects them, or they've got a boyfriend or partner or girlfriend and they make a comment or they fall out. It really affects them in the workplace. So let's leave that at home. So what I would do on day one is just say, I know you love your mobile phone. It's absolutely fantastic. It's great. But what we do here is, because of health and safety, because of employment law, because of general data protection regulations, the video and recording, what we have is a mobile phone policy, which I want to point out to you, it's very important you know this. But in there, what we say is lock up your mobile phone, put it away, and you can only use it, you know, in your break or lunch hour. And that way you can catch up with your text then and your Facebook and all your social media. But what we say is, while you're working for us, you know, you're on the job, so to speak, we want you to engage with us, so we want to train you. And that way, if you get any news, now if there's an emergency call, now you'll get somebody go, well, what if there's something that happened, you know? Well, then in that case, you know, we're going back to the 80s. There's a landline, okay? And if any, I'm going to give you the number. If anybody needs to urgently reach you or my mobile, this is it. Give it to your family, your partners, your mums and dads. And then if they need to reach you, that's how they reach you. Also, what I'd like to draw attention to, we all love social media nowadays, but it's also good, but it's also the downfall of people. So I want to point out to you some little scary stories of what's happened in social media by people passing comments. So what had ask you, and I'm going to get you to sign for this, is that please don't be vocal about my company. Don't photograph or record or video, you know, on WhatsApp groups. Don't speak about other members of staff, because we don't want people to be bullied. Don't speak about our company or what we're doing, or video anything. And your fellow employees, and we adapt that with everybody. It's not just yourself, the whole company do that. And that's the way we work. Social media can be positive, but there's a real negative side of that as well. And that's what I would do to engage them as well. So making sure that you're talking about this communication skills. But this is how my youngest daughter, she answers the phone. She goes, you know, somebody rings up, and I say, get my phone. She goes, oh, what? What did she say? And you know, so it's training that person. So I say to her, Fleur, you know, be a bit more animated when you're talking to people. You know, there's this silence. So giving them great communication skills, and it's very, very basic skills, but once taught, they keep them forever. You know, and you know, so it's really, really important. The jobs must offer quality placements, meaningful and suitable, that will benefit the participant in future. Employer progress should be monitored to the satisfaction of the compliance and quality requirements of the scheme. These are things to look at for. So dealing with younger members of staff, typical issues with younger members of staff and how to deal with them. Younger members of staff, especially if they're starting their first job, can display levels of immaturity. You know, where they go, no, I'm not doing that, you know, and, you know, you can show me your job, not working for you anymore, you know, and the thing is, you know, when somebody loses the temper, it's not just young people, by the way, that do that, but you let them go and you bring them back in, okay, you write to them, or you try and encourage them, you know, that they say this isn't acceptable, this isn't how you would act in work. Employers should make sure they're aware of the consequences forms of misconduct from the company through the maintenance and distribution of clear policies. And that's why this induction is very, very important, to engage them, to welcome them, and in a very positive way say, look, these are the things that might end up with us having a word with you. Be patient with them. Young members of staff who are new to work may need additional training on office etiquette, such as answering phones. They could also be taken into account when considering the training they are to be provided. Bear in mind that workers, aged 16 and 17 can't work night shifts between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And I know that, you know, when I started out, my mum said to me, she said, this is a brilliant opportunity. And I looked like an air hostess as I was walking to work. By the way, I walked over, it was about 3 miles to work to get to work. There was no bus route. I was determined. I ended up getting a bike. And when I got there, I was so excited because my mum had prepped me up. And, you know, to say that, she said, work as hard as you can. She said, you know, and work, whatever they ask you to do it. She said, don't moan. And I worked over and above the hours. And, you know, after like I said, six weeks, they took me on full time because I was so dedicated. But we've got to remember now, laws apply now in health and safety. You can't expect me to work at 9 o'clock at night. You know, there's no 16, 17-year-olds cannot work night shifts between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So working from home, it can be very difficult for employees to transition from office to home working, and routine is one of those affected areas. So we wanted to talk about this because it may be that you might have to have people working from home. So we've got home worker agreements in place. We've got the health and safety side of it. We talk about program routine behaviour over time, video conferencing, engaging people on video conferencing. And actually, do you know what? Young people bring fresh ideas into the workplace, things you've never, ever, you know, learned before. Things that you might not know that you can do. So whenever, I don't know if it happens in your home, if you have young people around you, but whenever, I'm so lazy now, if there's a problem with my Sky, my Netflix or my Prime, you know, the first thing I do is I shout my son and say, I can't get it on, or I've got a problem with my laptop, or I've got this problem. You know, they've got, and when I say, look, I'm doing this, my son says, well, why don't you do it this way? So think about this. They have so many fresh ideas, fresh ways that you can market your business. Might save you a fortune of marketing your own company by taking out these talents and skills of these young people that you're employing, and also, again, at the same time, you're engaging them. But if, however, you do have staff working from home, let's talk about this routine. Let's not having them rolling out of bed at night, you know, at 9 o'clock. 10 to 9 in the morning, they're rolling out of bed and then suddenly logging on, you know, and working. So a program routine behaviour over time, lunch with colleagues over video conferences, carry on engaging them, regular morning face-to-face meetings, a home worker agreement. Don't forget, health and safety doesn't end when people are at home. So we need to have a risk assessment in place, and we need to document that. So working time, when we're moving from office to home working, no travel required if permanently working from home. So we've got to remember the working time regulations still apply to everybody. We've been Brexited, we're Brexited now, and a lot of the law, as we know, in the past, I don't know if you know this, case law so the law, we had two sources actually, which was the Houses of Parliament and case law at a tribunal. But there's 76 complaints in tribunal, two most common are unfair and constructive dismissal. But what we have is we had European law that we used to take into consideration. That's the case now, although a lot of the European law will still apply. And one of that part of that law is the working time regulations, which I have to talk about because you are using young people. So working time regulations, half of it is employment law, half of it is health and safety law, so 50% of each. And we've got to remember working hours, breaks, people are entitled to breaks, you know, and if they're working from home, there's no travel required if permanently working from home. So managing performance, key question, how do you measure the performance of your new staff and office-based employees, online reports, products? I'm not going to go into great detail about this because this is something we can help with you with, and so can Mark. So what we call our smart objectives, and smart objectives are measurable, are set out, and it's just really where you're specific in nature, you measure them, achievable. But what I always say before we go through this, everything is achieved with a conversation. If you've got an issue with somebody, if there's something that's you see bubbling, a conversation is needed. Okay, everything, as far as I am concerned, starts with a conversation, and that's what you would do. So if things aren't working out, discuss with the employee, preferably face to face, what is the current situation, is anything, so if you've got somebody who's not performing, if there's a problem with them, and I would adapt this actually if you're talking about most things with a young person, and you know, you might find out that home life's not great, it might be something that's going on with something else, their health. So, you know, is there anything preventing you from joining in with a team, from achieving your targets? So what I do is it all starts with that conversation. Grab a cup of coffee, grab a can of Coke, come on, let's sit down. You know, I've noticed that you've been late a few times. You know, we've got to remember some of these people you're taking on might have children, they might already have commitments, they might just need that foot in the door to get them up that ladder, to give them an opportunity they've always been dying for, since, you know, for the past few months or years. So at the moment, to take people on, we may have to conduct remote interviews. This coronavirus pandemic continues to cause changes on how we operate. And one of those changes is how we conduct the interview process. So, you know, what we've got to remember when we're doing online interviews is we've got to prepare the person that's having the interview. And remember, it's very, very exciting, but it's also nerve-wracking for people. So, you know, don't judge people if they're sat like that, because they might not have had training to sit up like that for an interview, or the way they dress. You know, you're now their role models. People are a product of the environment that they're brought up in, and you are now that environment that's going to train and mentor them. But in the interview, remain calm, inviting and professional. Okay, and relay that information, especially to a young person. Hi, Amanda. Hello, thanks for connecting. You know, I'm glad you got on with the Wi-Fi. But just let you know, first of all, I've got your telephone number and you've got mine. So don't worry if the connection or the band or whatever fails. I can give you a call and I'll call you back and we can go through it on the telephone. So don't worry, just relax. I want you to have just relax. Don't worry if the door goes. Don't worry if the dogs bark. This is live. This is the internet. So but the main thing is that you're comfortable. So I get the best out of you for this interview. Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your hobbies. So that's what you want to do, is you want to make that person comfortable to begin with, so that you can then manage the situation, get the best out of them, and then, you know, really sit with them and get them for an interview. You can really get the best out of them if you've relaxed them in the first place. So potential outcomes of the Kickstart scheme: you are helping a young person become more qualified for a role, get more experience, And I remember leaving the company after 4.5 years that I worked for, and I left with a portfolio. And in those days, you had a written reference of somebody. So you give a good reference, and you've developed them both professionally and personally. So when you know that 6 months is about to end and you haven't got the ability to take that person on, why didn't you create that portfolio with them, with their fresh CV that you give them on a disc? Where disc is it now, or I don't know, USB? You give them their CV on a disc, you print as well, you give them a letter of recommendation, and you give them, you evidence all that experience they've got, so they leave you and they will never ever forget how you've helped them, and they will always talk about your company in a positive way. And you never know where you're going to be in life, and you might be sat in front of that person hopefully one day when they are a director of a company anyway, and they might be taking you on, taking the employee on as a full-time member of staff. You might be taking the employee on as an apprentice. And it's good for your external reputation, as Mark has actually emphasised the fact of how many hundreds of people that Mark has helped through similar schemes, displaying the company as one that is prepared to provide training opportunities to staff. But you can talk about that as a positive way of taking on. So what type of contract do I give? There is a specific Kickstart contract that should be provided to employees in this situation. How do I dismiss a Kickstarter if they prove to be unsuitable? You should process disciplinary capability procedures in the same way as you would normally. As for the grant, for using the scheme is paid monthly. Payments will stop being provided following your notification that the employee has been dismissed. However, you may need to outline to HMRC why this is. Are risk assessments different to young workers? Excuse me. Yes, they can be. But if we do a risk assessment, we can hold your hand with that anyway. Can a Kickstarter take you to a tribunal? Yes. As an employee, they retain the right to do so as usual, such as for discrimination. And do Kickstarters pay national insurance? Yes, they do. Now, that's the summary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the contact information. And what I'd ask now is, while I'm looking at the question, is I'd ask, I hope I've covered enough for you, Mark and Christian. You know, I'm sure there's been loads of questions bubbling from this. What I'd like to do now is, while I'm looking at the question, to see if there's anything that I can haven't answered all the way through, is to see if you two would like to add to what I've just spoke about.
Amanda, can you just cover off about the Uber and the self-employed?
Oh, sorry, I did say I'd talk about that, didn't I? Right, okay. Right. First of all, massive piece of a massive case coming this year with Uber. We're waiting. We've been sick of it, really, waiting for the outcome of it. Now, just self-employment, what you get in life is people, you'll be stood in a pub. Do you remember pubs? You'll be stood in a pub or restaurant, have a friend, and they'd go, I'm self-employed. And you find this a lot in construction, you find it in a lot of industries, hospitality, for example, people saying I'm a self-employed individual. And from my experience, people are very happy being self-employed until you try and end that relationship you've got. That's the first thing. So, pandemic hits, the first thing you're looking at, if you're changing hours or looking at, redundancies or whatever, you're looking at the type of people you employ. And what lots of people do is they look at the contractors or people they think are self-employed and they lay them off. Okay. Now, this is where we find out the mistake, because I'm very happy being self-employed until you try and end that relationship. And what happens is I'm thinking, I've worked there for 3 years. I don't work for anybody else. I'm going to get some advice. So what I then do is ring Citizens Advice Bureau or ring ACAS, and they say, well, actually, our interpretation is you're not a self-employed person. So let me clear this one up. If somebody's talking to me about self-employment, I'm insisting on a contract for services. So let's just say I'm self-employed and I'm working for Mark. Mark would say, I'm taking you on a self-employed contract. Here's your contract for services. And it would say, my name's Amanda Chadwick. This is a contract for services. I am genuinely a self-employed person. I don't just work for Mark. So it would say, you don't just work for me, you work for other companies. Yes. You invoice me and you invoice other companies. Yes. The right of substitution, which plays a huge part in employment law, especially in these tribunals that we see, the right of substitution, in fact, the case that Lorraine Kelly had, she won it on the right of substitution and the right of control. So right of substitution means that if a genuinely self-employed person, if I couldn't come in today, I could send anybody else in my place and you wouldn't care, So that's the right. So I can send anybody in my place. The right of control is where you don't dictate what I charge. I dictate it. And with this Uber case, which I think they will lose, what will happen is, you see, with an Uber driver, there's a control element in this contract. Uber dictate what the driver charges before even people get in. And this is what they're saying, that's not genuinely a genuinely self-employed person. So in the contract for services, the right of substitution, the right of control play a huge part. If anybody's sat there now thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I've got self-employed there, you know, speak to Christian about that, or Mark, you know, because we need to get this right, because there's real focus on this at the moment. We've got, so the Lorraine Kelly case, HMRC wanted over £1 million from Lorraine Kelly. They said, you've got the Lorraine show, you know, it's called Lorraine. She won her case, and she said, you know, the right of substitution, I can send anybody else in to do my job. And also, you know, the right of control, you know, it's proven the right, you know, the Lorraine show can be run by anybody, but the right of, I charge what I want, you know, and that's what she said, and she won a case. We've got big focus on this, so we've got to get it right. Then we've got IR35 coming in, which if you employ 50 or more staff and a certain level of money, then I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, it's your responsibility from April this year to make sure that those people are genuinely self-employed, because I promise you the HMRC will have you get starters. And what you don't want is a tribunal where you've laid somebody off and you've said they're self-employed, they've taken advice, issued tribunal papers, and then suddenly you owe them redundancy, back payment of holidays, and you haven't paid them the right money. So you need to get it right. So I hope I've covered that off for you, Christian. So Mark, Christian, I thought you'd interact while I look at the questions that we've had.
Yeah, there's a few other questions that I'll answer what I can answer, and then you answer what obviously falls under kind of HR or health and safety specialisms that you guys are there for. So obviously contracts, we've covered a lot of that sort of stuff. Self-employed, I think that's a hugely important area, because it's a big thing in the sector that people say, you know, should they be self-employed, or there's huge amounts of self-employed people in the sector, which is fine if they genuinely fall under that. If they don't, because also we've had questions around self-employed, you know, people are generally using self-employed people, can they take someone on a self-employed scheme? Obviously not. This would have to be their first member of staff on the payroll, or whoever's on the payroll, they'd have to join, and they have to, in order to qualify, they have to qualify as a payrolled member of staff, because you've got to evidence to HMRC and Department of Work and Pensions that you have paid them through your payroll, and that you've paid your national insurance and all of those sort of things. That's one of the key requirements from the DWP, that obviously they're on payroll. One question you might be able to answer, Amanda, is, I mentioned it kind of earlier in my bit, there's a minimum amount of hours, which is 25 hours, and a minimum amount of pay. One question somebody's asked is around maximum hours, and also, would it be best practice to take them on a fixed term contract of 25 hours minimum wage, and then if you think they're better, then how do you go about increasing their hours or pay?
Well, you'd embed into the contract. You could still have it's a fixed term contract saying it's a Kickstarter contract, and you'd say we are bringing you in on I keep changing the name, Flickstart, a Kickstart contract. And what you would embed in there is a term and condition. If you know that you'll be able to offer them extra hours, is that you could say that we may be able to, something like, this contract is for a minimum of 24 hours under the Kickstart scheme. Any further hours will be paid at this rate, and we will offer you this, you know, or it might be paid at the same rate, but you may, as and when, be asked to work, and it may be above the 25 hours minimum. So you'd adapt it so you could do that if you wanted to, and offer them more than the 25 hours. So you definitely can have wording in there to allow you to do that. But it still says that this will end, you know, it can end at the end of 6 months. It's a fixed term contract for 6 months.
Okay. So what about maximum hours?
Well, that would depend on age and if they've opted out. So at the moment, we've got the working time regulations. So the working time regulation says that for 48 hours a week, you can't work more than 48 hours a week. So what you would say is they'd either opt out of the working time regulations, or where they can do more than hours than that, or they opt in and there's a maximum of 48 hours a week. I would like to point out that with any employee you've got under the working time regulations, you are responsible for any other hours that they do in any other job. So another term and condition that you would have in your handbook would say, if you want to work elsewhere, please apply in writing and let us know. So that way, what you haven't got is me working for you, Mark, doing my 25 hours a week, and I'm blimmin' exhausted, cause an accident because I am exhausted, because what you don't know is I'm working 40 hours in another job, you know, and fitting this Kickstart scheme. So we need to control it and manage it. And you do that by having that term and condition in place. But under the working time regulations, it would say, you know, no more than 48 hours a week.
Yeah, and one another question asked by people related to that is the kind of the flexible working aspect. If people are working from home, and you know, a young person might, you know, although they're young, they might still have a family, or they might have other things. So how dictatorial can you be around the hours, or you know, do you have to offer flexible working, and how will that flexible working work?
Right, okay, so flexible working, I just want to clear really the law on that. That first of all, if you want to request flexible working hours, or you want to be a home worker, or whatever type of style of flexible working you want, normally in ordinary law, but let me just stop for a second. It's everybody's business. You can do what you want. This is just what the law says. So some people offer flexible working from day one. But the law is, if I work for you, Mark, I should have worked for you for 26 weeks. And that then gives me the right to say, I'd like to have flexible working. So that's the ordinary law, okay? I'd then put it in writing, and you'd respond in timescales of, you know, and it's a letter writing exercise. What we've got at the moment is this unusual pandemic. And I would adopt the approach that you have with your ordinary regular staff. And maybe we could do a home worker a webinar, actually, Mark, which would be quite interesting, which we could talk about those home worker agreements in depth, the training, the performance management. But with any home worker agreement, what you have in place, again, is a term and condition embedded in there, which would say, if it's not working out, we can end this at any point. We can bring you back into the office, you know, because we found that you're not performing. We found you're not logging on at 9 o'clock in the morning. You're not engaging with us. In fact, we don't think you're doing anything. We just think you're sitting at home. So a home worker agreement is very important to establish and set those rules and standards and expectations. And then if they aren't working out, we can end this. You know, if it's not working out. But for me, again, it's all about this engagement. It's about engaging with staff from day one. It's engaging with them at 9 o'clock in the morning, where if you worked for me, Mark, and you were 16, for example, and what I would do is I would arrange every morning at 9 o'clock that we're on a video conference here, and I expect you to be smartly dressed. And I would set the standards already, and then I would set you up for the day, talking about not just you, but the whole of the team. And I would talk about what I expected for the day. Is everybody okay? You know, it's Monday morning, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, very difficult. I know you're in a home environment. Anybody having any issues, let me know. This is what you should do throughout the day. Meet you at 12 o'clock for lunch, again on video conferencing, and then meet you at the end of the day. So I'm engaging with them 3 times a day to keep them mentored, and also spotting the signs of anybody that might be feeling that they're, you know, stressed with mental health.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks for that. So there's a couple of questions that I can answer that are more related to kind of the gateway or the specific advice from the DWP, which might help people. You mentioned it briefly around apprentices, and almost, I think the way this is structured, it's very much to encourage apprenticeships afterwards. The way to almost think of it is a kind of a free apprenticeship scheme, because again, there's, you know, the government encourages apprentices because there's a levy towards that, and people don't fully understand, or the average person doesn't fully understand what apprenticeships are. Apprenticeships, as you will know better than me, are any work-based learning now. You know, our view of apprenticeships was someone doing a plumbing course at 16 previously, leaving school and all those sort of things. Now apprenticeships are any work-based learning. So I think they've structured it, the 25 hours minimum wage is about what you'll pay an apprentice. So it's a similar sort of structure, makes it easier for that to follow on, and you know, the employer would get some more levies towards, or grants towards that thing. So it encourages them to try and take them on as an apprentice afterwards. So that's a good way of kind of thinking about the scheme for anyone that worried about apprentices afterwards. They can't go on a traineeship afterwards. The DWP have clarified that, and that's not applicable. I had a question coming on WhatsApp while I was here, and I'll just pull it up. Stuart, if he's still listening.
Oh, can I just interject there? Because somebody's asked me about equipment to work from home. This is for anybody.
Yeah.
You know,
okay.
yeah. And they're asking about equipment. Yeah, if they haven't got it, you may provide it. And you need to, you're not going to somebody's house to do a risk assessment. What you're actually saying is you're saying, you know, I'm entering into this home worker agreement with you under health and safety. You have to take your breaks. You can't work more than the hours. You must, you know, and they're signing to say, yeah, I will take a break. Yes, I won't pick my laptop up at 9 o'clock at night while I'm watching Netflix. I'll carry, you know, I won't answer emails at 10 o'clock at night. They're signing to say they won't. What we find after any incident in life affecting employment law, we always have a conversation culture afterwards. So I promise you now, you will get people that will say, I've got a bad back from working from home. So what you need to do is prepare now for that. So what you would say is, you don't sit on your laptop, I feel like sitting on it. You know, I don't sit on my couch with my laptop on my knee. I sit at a desk with a chair, and, you know, and I sign to say that's what I do. So when somebody says, I got a bad back, you know, I'm doing a different voice just to make it animated, but, you know, I got a bad back from working at home. You can turn around and say, well, actually, when Amanda started working from home, we did a full risk assessment. We got a home worker agreement in place. We gave her the right equipment, and she signed to say that she was responsible for health and safety. She's now saying that she's got a bad back from working from home, and that's how you would defend it. So it's really important to make sure you do all that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what's coming across from you, Christian, would back this up, I'm sure, is prevention's better than cure. In these circumstances, the cure.
Very much so. Yeah, I think some of the key considerations you've got to cover off: manual handling, display screen equipment, stress at work, keeping in touch with that individual to make sure they're okay regularly, and believe it or not, slips, trips, and falls. So if you work in like a home bedroom, the employer has got a duty of care to protect you in that environment. So you need to go through about making sure your cables are tucked away, even though you would say, well, it should be the person in their bedroom to do that. You've still got to instruct and document and get agreement for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all those little things that you don't necessarily think about, that, you know, this was the important thing with this webinar. Stuart's question was specifically around the contracts. Just to clarify for Stuart and others, the contract is between the employee and the employer. The gateway doesn't employ them. In the early stages, the DWP was suggesting that, but I think it was too complicated for someone like me to employ thousands of people across the UK, and then that person's money. The employer does enter into agreement with the gateway through the government, so effectively they're entering into agreement with the DWP around, and that's a set standard agreement. It's fairly template. There's no variation of that. They're just agreeing to do this scheme properly, ethically, morally, all those sort of things. Those ones that have been approved through me and through other gateways, they've been through a government system called Spotlight, which checks them out and makes sure. This is why sole traders aren't eligible at the moment. So they're working on that, because they can't run them through the Spotlight system because they're not on company's house. So that checks things like how many people you've made redundant recently, how many people you've got on payroll, so that you can't suddenly apply for 30 people when you've only got 3 staff already. They're effectively checking that you're not taking the mick out of the scheme, you've been running your business properly, all those sorts of things. So that's a key thing for people to consider. To see if there's any other questions.
I just wanted to say as well, jokes, you know, with young people, just be conscious of jokes you make, because it's a different era again. And, you know, things that you might think are funny might not be funny to somebody that's younger, you know, been brought up in a different environment, different schooling. So be aware of things that you might say. I was sent for the glass hammer, you know, so, you know, and things like that, you know, the jokes of the left-handed screwdriver, all that type of stuff, you know. So we've had those jokes. I think they're funny, and we might think they're funny now, but we don't think they're funny. And just finally, I'm going to just tell you about those jokes. that people can make a joke, and they we might think it's funny at our age, but people that are younger might take it the wrong way. So we've got to be aware of that as well, and who we're taking on. And I'm sure you're professional like that anyway, but even more so when you're taking on the other person.
Yeah, so I think that I'd like to thank you guys for all the expertise you've passed across. My final word would just be, overall, I think it's a great scheme. Otherwise, I wouldn't be involved. It's done properly, and that's the key word. It has fantastic benefits for the employer and fantastic benefits for the employee. But you just got to do it properly from both aspects. Choose a good gateway. Make sure that you see the training and support as a key thing, because generally with staff, what you put into them is what you'll get out. If you take someone on this and then just expect them to be self-starting from day one and get 6 months of labour out of them, and then, it doesn't happen. You've got to put, if you want to get something out, you've got to put a lot in, and you will be rewarded in time. You yourself, Amanda, are a great example of that. That employer put time and effort into training you up and got 4.5 years of fantastically motivated young member of staff with enthusiasm and all those sorts of things. So done properly, it's a great scheme.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for presenting today, and to Mark.
Welcome.
If anyone has got any further questions for myself or Mark, you've got our contact details there. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, if you want to arrange a complimentary video meeting with me, if you've got any follow-up questions, or if you've got any other challenges within your business, maybe with other employees, or you want guidance on the good work plan that Amanda talked about with your contracts, making sure that they're all compliant, if you want to know what you need to cover off from a health and safety perspective, or if you want to have a demo of our software, we've got some fantastic cloud-based software which does support homework, and you've got clocking in app, you can do your rotas, you can even backtrack so you can see who's been vaccinated within the business. We've got e-learning training courses for display screen equipment, home working, going back to work after coronavirus. So any guidance you need, or if you want to have a bit more of a detailed discussion about specific people and whether or not they are actually self-employed, if you're a bit worried about the status side of things. So thank you very much, everyone that's listened today. And like Mark said, it's a fantastic scheme. So good luck with everything, and thank you very much for your time. You're
welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Mark. Okay, thanks for having me, Christian. Okay, right, see you. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye. Bye.